Welcome everyone to CDO's magazine series of one-on-one interviews with CDOs, data leaders and key influencers. I'm your host, Robert Lutton, Vice President of Sandhill Consultants, and I'm coming to you today from Toronto, Canada. Working with the CDO magazine, MIT CDO IQ Symposium, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Eric Herzog from the Infinidat, who's the Chief Marketing Officer, and Ken Steinhardt, the Chief Technology Officer, also from Infinidat. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Love talking to CDO.
Thanks, Robert. Glad to be here.
It's my pleasure. Now, I understand that you had a previous interview with Mark Johnson, which people can see on the cdomagazine.tech website. And you talked about digital transformation and how storage is critical to an organization's cybersecurity strategy. In fact, Ken, I think we were talking about really there's nothing new under the sun that hasn't been done before. So you've definitely earned your stripes with a lot of history and knowledge that you bring to the forefront, especially in Infinidat. As we were talking just off camera, I thought it would be worthwhile for maybe Ken to give us a quick overview of what Infinidat does and how it can help the enterprise client, because your stories have been great. And I think that we'd like to get that out to the masses there. So, Eric, do you want to just give us a quick update on an overview of what Infinidat does and how you're, the top growing partner, and introduce Infinidat to our listeners?
Sure. So Infinidat is an enterprise storage-centric company. We focus on the global Fortune 2000 and associated sort of similar entities in government. We are global in nature. We have customers all over the world. In fact, 25% of the Fortune 50 use Infinidat solutions. So we're very, very focused on these upper end solutions. They're enterprise class. And we really focus on applications, workloads, and use case. We can do all of the storage nerdy stuff that everybody can do, but we do it better. And for us, the real focus is on what we do to optimize applications, workloads, and use cases, and our industry acclaimed customer centricity. In fact, Gartner, the leading analyst firm, does a thing called Peer Insights. We were the customer award winner 3 years in a row, and that is based on reviews written by real end users. We can't write the reviews. Our channel partners can't write the reviews. Has to be an end user. And they pointed it out. And in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for storage, which we've been a leader in for 4 years in a row, they pointed out that our white glove service is regularly talked about by the end users. So that's what we do. We try to make it easy. We focus on reducing capital and operational expenditures. Ken and I together probably are getting close to 100 years of storage experience. Sounds a little scary, but it's true.
All right. That's about right.
And we can tell you that we have never, ever, either of us, met a CIO who used to be a storage person. So when you're talking to C-level execs, CIO, CISO, CEO, many times even the senior VPs that work for the CIO, they're never a storage guy. So it's really all about how storage helps applications, workloads, and use cases, and how it can optimize real business results, like reducing the CapEx and storage related to storage. And storage is a very expensive proposition if you're not careful. Very, very expensive. So that's us in a nutshell.
Eric, I totally agree. The kind of background that you and Ken bring to the forefront for storage and infrastructure is definitely going to be of interest to our listeners. Now, I understand for today, we've got a couple of topics that we're going to expand upon. One of them you just mentioned, which was how does storage and infrastructure impact an organization's data center cost and the cost of doing business. We'll also talk about the integration of storage solutions into data centers and AI ops, a term that we will define later on. So do stay around. Jumping right into it, Eric, let's start with how storage infrastructure can impact an organization's data center costs and the cost of doing business. Now, from that statement, we've actually had a prior discussion about there's a lot of discussion around storage infrastructure and how it's a huge expense for the data center. Could you help explain what are some of the ways storage and Infinidat can actually help reduce overall storage center costs? Eric.
Absolutely. So there's really a couple different ways that storage impacts the data center. First is the capital expenditure needed. So it can be exceedingly expended. The second one is operational expenses: watts, slots, power, cooling, floor space. And of course, a subset of OpEx is operational manpower, people power, if you will. What does it take to manage the storage? Industry analysts estimate that to manage a terabyte of storage costs $1,000 a month, just to manage it. Forget what you're delivering. And then, of course, the other is the impact on real-world applications, workloads, and use case. So let's take an example. Let's say there's an SAP workload, and this is actually a real customer of ours. Right. So they were using someone else's storage. The SAP workload took 2 hours and 30 minutes to run. So while that's running, the people who need to access that report, whether that be logistics, finance, manufacturing, whatever they're using SAP for, they're not using it, right? Because it takes 2 hours and 30 minutes. Well, they didn't switch their SAP. They didn't switch the servers. They didn't switch the operating system. All they did was switch the storage. And that exact same SAP workload ran in 30 minutes. So 2.5 hours to 30 minutes. So that's an example of how storage can impact what I'll call the operational expenses of other functions that have nothing to do with IT. Logistics, manufacturing, finance, shipping, support, and service, all these things that companies need to run and how it can impact all of those. So when you take a look at the first two, CapEx and OpEx, pretty straightforward. One of the things that we really do is consolidate storage. Our storage is exceedingly fast. And because it's exceedingly fast, instead of having a piece of storage run workload 1, workload 2, workload 3, all as separate pieces of storage, we allow massive consolidation. So what that does, for example, one of our customers is a global telco in the top 10 telcos in the world. And for one of their workloads, a couple of their workloads actually, they had 57 storage arrays, physically 57 from another vendor. Wow. They now are running it on 5 of our InfiniBox products. So you went from 57 storage arrays to 5. So 1, they freed up floor space. They freed up rack space. They freed up power. They freed up cooling. They clearly freed up tons of operational manpower. And on top of that, they accelerated several of those workloads where they were running 2, 3, 4 times faster than they ran with the previous storage. So you had an impact on the capital expenditure, an impact on the operational expenditure, and in this case, an impact on the non-IT operational financial aspects, because those reports were running 2, 3, and 4 times faster than they did with the other storage. So that's a clear example of the CapEx and the OpEx side, the operational manpower side. And again, in the other case, the manpower, the operation, et cetera, of functions that have nothing to do with IT. So that's an example of how storage can dramatically impact costs. We also do help customers protect their data with backup solutions. And again, one of our customers had 14 backup devices. They now run with 2. Same scenario, less manpower, less OpEx, less CapEx. So those are really key tenets. And then the last thing we do to help out is our software. Our software all is done automatically and autonomously. For example, if there's a component failure, and any storage person who gets on CDO magazine and says, we never have a problem of failure, is full of poo-poo. Just ain't true. Okay. So storage systems are built with incredible redundancy, as are servers and networks. It's physical, right? It's a physical piece of hardware. So what we do is we use our AI ops, which Ken's going to talk about in a minute. Our AI ops technology, we automatically identify and do proactive health monitoring of the system. We have several public references who talk about how they didn't even know that they needed a new power supply. We called them or we emailed them, because our AI ops software does that. We also make sure that our software automatically adapts to changes in workloads. So if you had 5 servers and all the workloads pointed at our storage, and now you add 5 additional servers and point at the workloads, we learn about all those workloads automatically. You don't do what's known in the storage world as performance tuning. You don't reconfigure the storage. We actually do it on our own. If you will, we're iRobot from that movie. We do it ourselves. We don't have the human has to do anything. We do it.
Eric, I can clearly see why Infinidat is one of the fastest growing storage infrastructure organizations globally. So watch the space, listeners. Let me just kind of move on to you. You talked about applications and workloads, and we know there's a plethora of such applications that run on external storage systems. And you talked about the massive consolidation that you're able to do, and yet have these applications and workloads still perform. Could you maybe explain, how this works and what the impact is to the cost center? You mentioned some of them. You mentioned about obviously decreased floor space. You mentioned decreased cost in the cooling, things like that. But can you talk about maybe an example of how a data center had, external storage systems, and how Infinidat was able to really improve and help the bottom line of the organization that implemented this from a return on investment point of view?
Sure. So we have a global Fortune 50 company. They were running about 250 petabytes of storage, which is a lot. They now run 50 petabytes of storage. So we've cut that from 250 to 50. All the workloads that were running on the 250, which was like a couple thousand workloads, now run on 50. So the application management and its interstitches to storage and servers is dramatically simplified because we've cut down all the storage that's connected to it. Obviously, from a pure CapEx perspective, and this customer was about to refresh, by the way, so they were going to buy 250 petabytes from their existing vendor. They came to us, they only needed 50 petabytes. So by going from 250 to 50, just the pure capital expenditure, they saved money. Second thing is from an operational perspective, they saved as well. So as an example, their director of storage infrastructure has actually presented at one of our internal company meetings. So he told us point blank, over the last 5 years, you saved us over $100 million in capital expenditure.
Wow.
And in operational expenditure, we save about $5 million a year. Now, the other part of your question was about the applications. So in this case, their applications are running anywhere from twice as fast, so 2x faster, to 5 times as fast, depending on the workload. And what that means is the end customers, the guys in manufacturing, the guys in support and service, if they're going to run a workload that took 5 hours, now it takes an hour. So you have there the savings that are generated from, if you will, the other function of the company that have nothing to do with IT: finance, support, service, accounting, payroll. If they're in the manufacturing business, obviously the manufacturing floors. Remember, most manufacturing floors are now robotic, so you're controlling the robots. You also have all the supply chain stuff. You have to order things, whether that be screws, nuts, bolts, whatever it is to put the product together, right? Say a car, for example, or say a computer, right? And so all of that stuff now is dramatically consolidated. And those workers that are doing those functions, like supply chain or manufacturing management, everything they're doing from the software they use now has gotten dramatically faster. So you've got the impact on CapEx, real world, that we just talked about, their OpEx, right? So 100 million and savings of 5 million a year on operational expenditures. And then what he didn't qualify, because he's in the IT team, the guy who spoke, their director, he doesn't know. All he knows is he hears from the Oracle guys and the SQL guys and the Mongo Cassandra team. Oh my God, all we know is all the end users saying how much faster it runs and are giving him anecdotally things like, well, that application used to take 5 hours, now it takes an hour, right? And so he hasn't really quantified that from a cost perspective, cost savings perspective. But obviously, we all know that if applications just take 5 hours and they take 1, you just clearly enhanced worker productivity. But even without that, 100 million in capital expenditures and 5 million in operational expenditure, you can't do much better than that. That all comes from this capability of consolidating storage, this autonomous automation where our software fully automates as almost everything in the storage infrastructure. So yes, there's a manager. But instead of having 5 storage managers manage 250 petabytes, they have 2 storage managers managing the 50. So again, it allows them to deploy those human resources in the IT department to something else other than managing storage.
And Eric, those cost savings are amazing, just amazing. I mean, they have a direct bottom line into the business value impact to the organization. Now, you just mentioned something about worker productivity and a nice lead in. In your opinion, from the Infinidat point of view, how can storage impact a worker productivity? Do you have any examples you can share with us?
Well, certainly from the worker productivity in IT, if you can have one storage administrator manage 50 petabytes or 25 petabytes, normally that takes 2, 3, 4 administrators minimum. So we can do it with one person. So that end user can now do that with one person. That's a worker productivity statement. The other statement, of course, is on those functions that are not in IT. Again, if I'm in manufacturing and I'm using it for manufacturing management and I'm waiting on some SAP report that takes 3, 4, 5 hours and now it takes 30 minutes or an hour, that person is now more productive in that function. So you've got really employee productivity within IT and employee productivity out of IT. That employee productivity out of IT is actually really, really a function of application acceleration, right? Because we can accelerate these applications. They're high-end enterprise applications. By accelerating those applications, the non-IT people become more productive, right? So you've got clearly IT productivity, less humans managing the storage saves money from for the CIO's perspective, right? From the VP of manufacturing, he's all about, you wait, that SAP workload, the guy didn't wait 5 hours, he only waited an hour or 30 minutes, so there's that, nothing to do with IT, and we can help in both areas. And clearly that helps and of course it makes the CIO look good with the CEO or with the other equivalents, because the VP of manufacturing, we're way more productive. All that software seems to be running better. And if he makes that sidebar comment to the CEO, that could be a bonus for the CIO.
Eric, Ken, what can I say? Wow. If I need, storage that can be self-automating, self-looking after and reduce my costs, definitely going to give you guys a call. And on behalf of the CDO Magazine, I'd really like to thank you for your time today, sharing your knowledge and the experiences. As you mentioned, 100 years of storage experience between the both of you. So that's a lot. And, we really appreciate that. We certainly hope that we'll have the chance to have you back and share your knowledge, perhaps on what's going on the enterprise storage sector again, and talking about the white glove service. So, gentlemen, on behalf of the CDO Magazine, thank you.
Thank you. We enjoyed, again, being with CDO.
Thank you, Robert. Greatly appreciate it.
And again, for our listeners, please visit CDO Magazine for additional interviews.